What's going on, everybody? It's Chris from the Bass Channel, and today we're talking about effects loops. What are they? What do they do? And most importantly, how can we use them? Now, before we get started, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. Also, if you like this shirt and want to see this and a couple other designs, check them out down below. First off, what is an effects loop? An effects loop is an optional break between your amp's preamp and power amp section that allows you to either put pedals in there or route one amp's preamp to another amp's power amp. There's a multitude of uses, and we're going to get into all of them. So the first one we're going to check out is using the effects loop with modulation or time-based effects. It helps to think of this method like a pedal board. Let's say you have your tuner, your compressor, maybe a filter, you've got an overdrive or a distortion, and then you've got modulation, delay, reverb, whatever you might have on the board. Now, as you know, chorus before distortion doesn't sound that pleasant, because what's happening is you're distorting your chorused signal. But really what we want to do for a more pleasant sound is chorus our distorted signal. And you don't have to use just chorus, you can do it with flanger. And of course, delay and reverb. Because again, particularly with reverb, you don't want to feed a reverberated signal into an overdrive. You'd rather feed your overdrive into the reverberation. Now that brings us to phaser. Now, while all of the modulation and time-based effects we've looked at so far is optional as to where you put it, it's typically more pleasant to put it after distortion. However, with phaser, it can sound dramatically different depending on where it's at in the chain. It's one of the few modulation pedals that, in my opinion, and in the opinion of others, sounds pretty good no matter what side of the distortion it's on. So let's hear it first in the front of the amp going straight in. And now let's hear it in the effects loop after the distortion. Okay, so that covers probably the most popular way to run the effects loop. Probably the second most popular way is to run an external preamp into the power amp section of your amplifier. Now, the main reason you would want to run something like this into the power amp section instead of just into the front is because the power amp is designed to cleanly amplify whatever comes before it. Whereas if you take something like this or any preamp pedal and run it into the front of the amp, you're taking this preamp, running it into a second preamp, which is again shaping this tone, and then amplifying it. What we want to do is we want to bypass the amp's preamp section, so we're getting just this cleanly amplified by your amplifier's power section. So just to illustrate that point, here's this preamp in the front end of an orange Terror bass. hear the same preamp with the same settings running into the effects loop return, also known as the power amp in. Obviously, you don't have to use this preamp. Let's try another one. The next use is you can take a feed from your amp's preamp and run it into the power amp of another amplifier. Say, for example, you have the Dark Glass Microtubes 900 and you want to feed that preamp into the power amp of, say, an Ampeg SVT. You would take a patch cable or standard instrument cable from the Dark Glass's effects loop send or preamp out into the Ampeg SVT's power amp in or effects loop return. Now, I don't have an SVT here, all I've got is the Microtubes and the orange Terrabase, so let's take the Dark Glass's preamp and feed that into the Terrabase's power amp. And now let's go the other way. Let's take the orange's preamp and feed that into the Dark Glass power amp. Now what this is going to do is take the orange's tube preamp, and instead of 500 watt solid state power, we're running it into an amp that has 900 watt solid state power. This way we get to retain the fundamental tone of the orange and just make it more powerful. The fourth method that we're going to cover is running an EQ pedal in the effects loop. What this achieves is it allows you to EQ and shape the preamp of your amplifier rather than shape the instrument going into the amplifier. So to illustrate this point, I have the Boss EQ200. We're going to start by running it in front, shaping the sound of the instrument, and then we're going to run it in the effects loop, shaping the sound of the amplifier itself. The fifth method is a noise gate that has its own effects loop. So typical noise gates have an in and an out, and they're designed to clamp down on whatever your noisiest piece of your signal chain is. Well, With something like the TC Electronic Sentry, this has an in, an out, and an effects loop. So essentially the way it's designed is to plug your instrument straight in, take the effects loop send, run it through your chain of pedals and whatever else you've got, take the last pedals out into the effects loop return, and then the output of that pedal into your amp. Well, let's say your amp is what's noisy. Let's take that same principle, eliminate the chain of pedals. So we're going to take our instrument, plug it straight into the Sentry, take our send into the front end of the amp. The amp's effects loop send is going to be feeding into the noise gate's return, and then the output of the noise gate is going back into the amp's effects loop return. Essentially what this is doing is this is clamping down on a noisy preamp if you have that issue. However, your noise floor is set much lower because what's triggering it is the sound of the instrument, not the sound of the entire signal. Typically, noise gates are set to open when the signal passes a certain threshold. Well, if you have a really noisy signal chain, that threshold will have to be set much higher, compromising your dynamics. Running it this way helps retain your dynamics since now the noise gate's threshold is triggered by the instrument only. So let's run it in the way I just mentioned through the Darkglass Microtubes 900 and check it out. The sixth and final way that I could come up with to use an effects loop is with either a volume pedal or some type of boost pedal. What this is going to achieve is either attenuating or giving a true clean boost to your signal. Let's start with the attenuation. Naturally, if you have any kind of volume pedal before your preamp, you're altering the signal and the amount of gain going into the amp. So if you have any drive going on, as you know, you're going to alter the character of that drive sound by sending a weaker or hotter signal, depending on which way you're going. By running a volume pedal or some type of attenuator in the effects loop, you're retaining all of the tone you've dialed in your preamp and simply turning the volume down. Conversely, by adding a boost, particularly a clean boost, you're now raising the level of the tone that you've dialed in. Because as you know, if you put a boost in front of an amp, especially one with distortion, you're going to drive the distortion more, you're going to put a hotter signal in, altering the character of the tone. So by putting one or both of these in your effects loop, you can cleanly manipulate the levels without altering your tone. And that just about covers it. If you have another use for an effects loop that I didn't list here, please let me know about it in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. You can also check out Patreon for more exclusive content, and right in this vicinity is a video that YouTube feels will best suit your interests. So until next time, I'm Chris from the Bass Channel, and thanks for watching.